Hello and welcome to the 8 Steps Framework for Montessori Business Success. My name is Jono and I'm going to be teaching this course. I've got 15 years of experience developing software for helping schools manage themselves. And over that time, I've spent hundreds of hours consulting with school leaders, helping them to understand how to apply different business practices. And from all of that time, I've developed this framework that makes it very easy for any Montessori leader to improve the performance of all the different key performance indicators, otherwise known as KPIs. So what this framework does is it breaks down each of the 8 KPIs, and it shows you how to take an approach that's very manageable to help incrementally increase and improve each one of those KPIs, those key performance business indicators, to work on each one of them month after month. So throughout this course, what we're going to be doing is breaking each one of these down. The reason why we break it down this way is so that you as a school leader, as somebody that's generally getting pulled in many different directions, can actually have a pragmatic approach to increasing the entire net margins that the school brings in on a business level 1 year over the next. So every year, what we're going to do is focus on trying to incrementally increase each one of these metrics by just 10% year after year. And that's why we focus on each one of these KPIs on a monthly basis. Because with all the different fires you have to pull out, teachers getting sick and getting pulled into the classroom, always getting pulled away from your critical administrative tasks, you're not left with a lot of time in your week or your month to actually work on business strategies. So trying to be pragmatic about it, if you can carve out 1 or 2 hours a week to just get creative, work with your team, come up with different strategies and ways of implementing different ideas to help each one of these KPIs with a complete focus for an entire month on each one, it then becomes very manageable and very practical to actually improve each one by 10%. Again, if you're able to improve each one of these metrics across the whole year by 10%, you can actually see 40 to 50% net margin improvement from 1 year to the next. And that means if you can do it again the next year, by the end of that second year, you're looking at an increase of over 100%. So in the first month, we'd want to focus on retention, because that's the best way to grow your school, first and foremost. Increasing the amount of students, obviously, that stay in your school. In month 2, we would then start working on strategies to increase the awareness, growing the awareness of new prospective parents learning about your school. In month 3, we would then move to focusing on inquiries. So trying to increase the ratio of people that learn about your school to the ones that actually take the step to inquire. So if we were comparing a school to a shoe store, awareness, you might call foot traffic that's walking by the shoe store in the mall, whereas an inquiry would be somebody actually walking into the shoe store and trying on a pair of shoes. In month 4, we'd then start focusing on enrollment. So actually focusing on different strategies for moving a family that has inquired to the point of actually enrolling in the school. Then you'd move to month 5, where we focus on the average number of children per family. Coming up with ways to increase the amount of children per family, of course, without trying to convince people to actually have more kids, but through the marketing and the enrollment process, figuring out ways of actually enrolling families that have more than one child. Then in month 6, you'd focus on the average program tuition, taking stock of your average tuition revenue per child and getting creative, working with your team and coming up with ways to increase the average program tuition per child. So that would be, there's various ways of looking at that. It's not just the most obvious way of increasing your tuition rates, but how to actually influence the different. And then in month 6, you'd focus on average program tuition. Getting creative and working on strategies for increasing your average tuition rates across all students. And then in month 7, we'd focus on increasing the number of programs per child. Then in month 8, we'd focus on profit margins, how to increase the actual net margins of every child that's in the school. Hey there, and welcome to Module 1 of the 8-Step Framework for Montessori Business Success. This module is all about retention, keeping students in the school. And here's what you're going to learn in this module. There's going to be 6 short lessons. How to improve parent communication. How to create and set up a newsletter system to effectively communicate information about the school with parents. How to implement continuous enrollment in your school month over month. How to involve staff in student retention. How to focus on delivering exceptional customer service. And by customer, of course, we're talking about parents. And last but not least, how to provide parents with ownership to increase retention rates. By the end of this module, you're going to have a list of ideas that you can use to increase your school retention rates. But this program is not about doing everything all at once. You're going to pick the one that you like best, and you can start with that one right away. And year over year, every time you're working on increasing your retention, you can start trying different strategies because every year you just want to increase each one of these KPIs by just 10%. So let's jump right in to how to improve parent communication. So in this lesson, we'll be talking about how to improve parent communication. But let's start off with talking about why. So apathy is one of the biggest reasons why parents leave your school. Your parents need to be engaged. Parent engagement is, not only is it incredibly critical for the outcomes of students, it's also incredibly critical for keeping your retention rates higher. So you want to make sure that you're using all the different communication methods that are at your disposal. In addition to that, you want to make sure that your communication methods and behaviors actually match with the expectations of the parents that are in your school. So why is that so important? So if you consider that the average school director is about 49 years old, and the average parent in your school is 28 years old, and every year school directors are getting older and older, whereas the parents, they actually stay the same ages. And especially within the last 10 years, if you consider the drastic changes in technology around communication, every year schools are finding it harder and harder to keep up with the expectations that their new parents have about how they want to be communicated with. So what you see in a lot of schools is from teacher to teacher and then across the administration, there's all these different kinds of, all these different methods for communicating information from the school to the parents. Also, communication also incorporates gathering information from the parents. So it's a two-way process. And if you consider that parents today are spending the majority of their communication time on Facebook, more than any other format, the way that schools are communicating today, whether it be a teacher that stuffs a sticky note in a backpack, or a school that's sending a weekly email with everything that's going on in the school being sent to every parent which in reality means that newsletter that incorporates everything for the school is about 90% irrelevant for most of the parents. Effectively, schools are training parents to ignore them today. So what we want to do is make sure that we are catering to the communication expectations of parents so that, most importantly, they open up the messages that you send them. We also want to talk about the content that's in this communication. Too often what we see at schools are really long newsletters that, again, incorporate everything that's going on in the school for every child. That information isn't necessarily all that exciting. Although it's important, it's not necessarily the most engaging. What parents really want to see, obviously they want to know what's going on with their child, with their children. They love information of what's happening in the classroom. But in addition to that, you can really engage parents, especially around parent education programs, by, instead of using your newsletters for just a long list of events and facts and reminders and announcements, if you are utilizing the other types of communication tools that can handle reminders about events and good calendar apps and other types of shorter message systems, then you can focus your newsletters on more engaging content, things that actually a parent might share with their friends. You should really think about the content of your newsletters being share-worthy, or being funny, or being passionate, or sharing your enthusiasm. Make it educational, make it utility-driven. So along with the method of communication, you also want to be thinking about the types of communication that you're sending in those different channels. In addition to that, you really want to be inviting parents in to engage with that communication. So with those newsletters or blog posts or Instagram posts, tweets, text messages, you always want to be inviting parents to give their feedback or to engage a conversation about it. The more you can engage parents in the conversation, the more they're engaged in the school, the more they're going to be developing a relationship with you. And that can have an incredible impact on retention rates, because parents that basically respect you and see you as the wise teachers, educators that they're entrusting their children's education with, if they actually get an opportunity to learn more about what you're doing and voice their opinions, then you've got a deeper relationship with that parent, and they're much less likely to want to move their child away from something that they know and feel good about. So improving parent communication is something that can be done, and it can have incredible impacts on retention. And so it's a combination of using the right tools and sending the right messages. Okay, so let's talk about some do's and don'ts with email in general. Email is a great tool, but it's really not always the ideal method to use for different forms of communication. So as an example, let's say you want to, you're working with a parent committee and you want to schedule a meeting, or let's say you want to reschedule a meeting. I spoke with a school leader recently who, they had a parent committee meeting scheduled, and they had to just reschedule it. And the method that they used to do that was the administrator sent a message from her to an email to the whole committee. So that was about 5 or 6 parents. And she was trying to just reschedule a meeting. And what happened was everybody was sending reply all emails back and forth. And the conversation thread became incredibly hard to manage because everybody's just sending reply alls, and then trying to figure out who said what and when that person's available, and then the sequence of the conversation, and everyone's using a different email system. It took about an hour for that person simply to reschedule a meeting. So it's not a great experience for the parents, and it's certainly not a great experience for the administrator. So things like that create frustration. And I mean, that same thing goes for your staff. So if you can utilize, when you're trying to communicate with a specific group of people, and you want them to be able to reply to you, and you actually want there to be a pleasant experience, one that's not hard to actually engage the conversation, you want to think about using social groups. So as an example, a Facebook group is one method that people use. Ideally, what you want to do is have a group where there can be a thread. So there's comments underneath. There might be one post by one person, and then other members of the group can then comment and continue on the conversation. But that conversation is now laid out so that everybody can see. It's very clear, all the different members that were communicating in that thread. That way, everybody can see it. Questions can be answered one time, rather than people hitting reply all and then having to search through the history of the conversation. When you use reply all for group communications, when you're using emails and using the reply all feature, as an analogy, it's you end up getting these like kind of bowls of spaghetti kind of stacked on top of each other. It becomes very messy and hard to find the information you're looking for. So again, social groups are a much easier and more enjoyable way to communicate with groups of people. It will reduce frustration, and it will actually increase the enjoyment of parents engaging with you, their staff, and one another. Another good option for replacing emails for certain kinds of conversation is text messages. So you want a system that allows you to also send SMS short messages. So that way parents are much more likely to get the notification. So ideally, your communication system will allow you to post in one place, but it actually goes out in not just maybe as an email notification, but also shows up on that parent's mobile phone. Again, ideal for broadcasting out to many people at one time, and helping to ensure that parents are informed. So the key is that, again, like I was referencing before, parents' expectations around communication are really different than they were 10 years ago. If you consider that today, you can hit a parent 10 times a day with a short message on their phone or through another short message system like tweets or Instagram or Facebook. By doing that, what you're doing is you're matching their current communication behaviors. And as long as all of your communication is bite-sized and 100% relevant, that's a much more efficient and enjoyable way to be reminded about things that are going on in their child's classroom, or things that are going on across the school, rather than a really long newsletter that has a long list of dates and announcements, because it's not like parents really want to ignore your emails. It's just that everybody's running around, they're really busy, and they're increasingly more and more busy, and they're also getting pinged all over the place by these short little messages, and so everybody is used to that. And what happens when an email comes in from the school and it's really long and it's got a whole bunch of information, and they know that only a small portion of that information is actually relevant to them, then I don't think anybody on purpose ignores them, but I think that there's this cognitive dissonance, And when they look at that email, they're like, okay, I'll get back to it later. But what ends up happening is then emails start piling on top of it, and it ends up getting pushed down the bottom of their inbox. And not by wanting to ignore you, but essentially they end up missing the information. And of course, when parents miss information, they're not happy. And when they come asking you for what, information on what's going on, and although you've sent that newsletter, and maybe by that time they're a little bit aggravated, that doesn't lend to a great experience for either the parents or for the administration or the teachers, who now have to work twice or three times as hard to make sure that everybody's informed, because they just keep on not reading those long newsletters. So if you can match the behaviors of the parents, the way they communicate today, you're going to find a much higher rate of parent engagement and of your parents being informed of what's going on. And ideally, parents actually engaging the communication rather than just letting it sit there at the bottom of their email inbox. One thing that's really important that I've heard from a lot of different schools, where they're getting feedback from their parents because of different school communication systems that schools adopt, is that you really want to make sure that parents don't have to log into a system to get information. And all the more so, you don't want them to have to log in to respond to something. So there's a lot of different parent portal applications out there that are being sold to schools. And what you want to look out for is that when you have a system that sends out information to the parents, it doesn't require parents to actually log in. It's not just a notification of, hey, you've got a message, click here to log in, because these are just added steps that parents don't want to go through. And the more steps, the more labor you put in front of parents to engage the information that you need them to see, the more steps there are, the less likely they are going to actually get to seeing that information. So ideally, notifications come, whatever system you're using, notifications should come out of that system. Ideally, it should always be filtered to the specific parents so that the only information they're seeing is 100% relevant. Shorter bits of information. It should hit them in their email inbox or their text messages, so that it's going where they are used to seeing information. And as well, when they want to reply or send a follow-up question, they shouldn't have to log in to do so. They should be able to, let's say they get an email notification, they should be able to reply right from that email notification. So something you want to look for is that whatever system you use, it doesn't do what's called a no reply email, where it sends a notification but it comes from no reply at such and such app.com. It actually allows the parents to reply, and therefore what you're doing is lowering the barriers of parent engagement and facilitating higher parent happiness. Another great way to improve the content and the quality of your newsletters is to actually remove a lot of the information around events. But you also have to make sure that parents are completely aware of what's going on with the school calendar. Of course, events for things that are applicable to the whole school, and very specifically to their children or the programs that their children are in. And the way you can do that while also removing that kind of boring information from your newsletters is to adopt a calendar tool that allows parents to connect and synchronize with their mobile or digital calendar of choice. Something that we see at schools quite often is that they're still using paper calendars, requiring parents to download PDFs and print them off. And that's not a great experience for schools. You really want to cut down the amount of paperwork that you require parents to manage. Likewise for the school administration, of course. But specifically on the topic of parent engagement and reducing, increasing your retention rate, A great way to keep parents informed of what's going on in the school regarding the calendar is to use a tool that synchronizes either with Google Calendar or what's called iCal. And that allows parents to synchronize the school calendar automatically with any mobile device that they use, or their online calendars like Google Calendar or Outlook. That way, whatever's going on in the school is right there in their main calendar system without any effort. They don't have to manually input it themselves, right? You're removing the levels of labor that it takes for for parents to remain informed of what's going on. Additionally, a good calendar system will send out events reminders automatically to the parents, remind them of things that are coming up, whether a day or a couple days or a couple hours beforehand even. This is great for keeping the parent conferences flowing nicely, so that or let's say school tours as well. You want a system that automatically reminds parents after they have booked the tour, or they've submitted a request to show up to an open house. You want a system that sends them reminders, ideally without you having to do it manually, because that's very time consuming for you as the administrator. And the reality is, the harder it is for you to manually manage a great parent communication system, the less likely it is that you're gonna have an optimal parent communication system, because school administrators and school leaders are just too busy to do all this stuff manually. It takes too much time to always only send every parent 100% relevant information regarding their child or the program that they're in. So you want a system that does that automatically, filters communication out to parents by way of their child, filters them by way of the programming, and then also sends automatic reminders, and of course synchronizes with the calendar applications of choice of your parents. So now that we're getting a lot of the kind of boring, busy work out of the newsletters, not using a newsletter tool for simple reminders or announcements, and generally sending these really long newsletters that have everything that's going on in the school and kind of blasting the whole parent body with everything for everybody. Now that you've got a system that is pulling out events, allowing parents to synchronize their calendars, that's sending notifications about certain programs and certain childs that are more bite-sized and 100% relevant, that really frees up the content in your newsletter to focus on really engaging topics, things that parents want to learn about, things that are specific to challenges that the parents are experiencing. Again, when you think about a newsletter, it should really involve and incorporate content that parents would actually share with their friends. You want it to be something that you want to think about the content that you're sending out in your newsletters to parents, almost like you're a magazine, and you're sharing content that they might actually pay for otherwise. That's how you really engage parents. That's how you keep parents looking forward to opening up all your emails. If you're sending them, let's say, weekly or monthly newsletters that they find engaging or inspiring or entertaining, that's how you get parents to look at you like a source of leadership and a source of wisdom. So you could be, just as a couple of ideas for topics, you could be sending parents tips on how to get kids to listen, how to toilet train their toddlers. There's so much wisdom within your school. You need to bottle it up and send it out in these kind of utility-driven or engaging how-tos, or funny, write about a funny incident with a couple of kids at the school. Obviously, make sure that you've got the permission to share this information. But if you are able to aggregate the years of knowledge and wisdom and entertaining, scenarios that can, be pulled out of the amazing staff at your school. That's information that, that will keep parents engaged, because that's probably the type of interaction they had with your staff when they came into the school. That's probably what got them to enroll in the first place. So you really want to keep that up with them. You want to be engaging them in lighthearted, inspirational, funny conversation, and you can do that with newsletters. And again, if your parents are finding your newsletters engaging and something that they want to read and would even share with their friends and their family, then instead of training parents to ignore you by sending really long emails that are mostly irrelevant, you're actually training parents to pay attention to your emails. And that's one of your surest ways to make sure that they're staying informed when you send them other communication about event reminders and announcements and other things that are really, really critical to the operational functionality of the office. Another critical form of communication is using a blog. When you think about how to engage prospective parents, very similarly to the newsletters that you're sending out, that same information is generally universal to all parents. So you want to be sharing that information on a blog on your website so that prospective parents can find you by searching for these topics. So if you have parents are in your area and they're even doing a Google search for how do I get my kids to eat vegetables, or how do I get my toddlers to play together better, they're going to find that content on your website, and then they're going to be connecting with your school. And of course, at that point, they're going to be very likely to want to learn more about your school if their children are, if they're looking for a school for their child. And also, they might just share that information with, they might, share it on Facebook to all their friends in the area. So it's very likely that if they have a whole bunch of other friends that live in your neck of the woods that are also, have school-age children. And by making the content on your website share-worthy, by putting it on a blog and having the right buttons for clicking to share on Facebook or clicking to share on Twitter, you're increasing your awareness, and getting your name out there, by being shared with parents that don't even have children in your school. So let's talk about blogging for a second. There's a couple of really important things to do before you launch a blog. Number one, you need to have a bit of a content strategy. So a really easy way to go about organizing a blog, what we suggest to schools very often is to get your staff together and just plan to have one blog post written up and posted on your website on a monthly basis. And you probably have enough staff to share that around and have everybody write one or maybe two blog posts a year. It's not that big of a commitment, and allow them to be creative and come up with a topic that they think parents would like to read about. And just all you need is to get with a calendar and schedule who's going to write the blog posts and when. It's a good idea to have also, as you share the responsibility of writing the posts, it's a good idea to also share the responsibility of editing the posts. But if you spread it around, then it's really easy to manage, and it's really easy to have a consistent timeline of blog posts. And that's something that's incredibly important for a couple of reasons. So you want to make sure that you're always putting a blog post out on the same day of every month. That's good for helping you be ranked higher in Google searches. It's also really good when prospective parents especially, look at your blog posts, and then they look at all the different blog articles that you've put out. It actually it shows a well-organized school if they're out there, if they can see that the post dates are consistent. Otherwise, it could actually look a little bad. So if let's say there's 2 blog articles in 1 month, and then there aren't any blog articles for 3 months, and then there's 3 blog articles, and then and 4 months later, that kind of looks inconsistent, and that doesn't give your school really the best light. So not only is it about the content, you also want to be showing parents that you're a well-organized school, because when parents are looking to enroll, they want that sense of trust, and they're going to be noticing things all over the place. So if you're well organized, if your communication is very consistent and standard, that's going to help engage. That's going to help impress prospective parents. That's also going to help keep parents in the school. So we're touching on another topic which is really important, right? Being consistent and standardized with your communications, because the more parents can come to rely on how you communicate and when you communicate, they can feel more trusted, and they'll also know when to expect communication, which is another really key element to keeping your parents engaged, so that they know, Friday at 3 o'clock, they're going to get this message from the school office, then they're going to keep their eyes out for it. But if you're not consistent with the timing and or the method, that's when messages get lost and parents don't know what's going on, and you get complaints in the office. So we want to avoid that, of course. Okay, so to wrap up this lesson, we've talked about a number of things, number of ways of using different communication methods. Number one, when you're communicating with a group of parents, and you're trying to organize things with a group, and you need them to respond back or follow up with you, don't use email reply alls. It just gets messy and nobody likes it. It's frustrating and it's very time consuming. It really turns parents off, and it really makes your life a lot harder than it needs to be. So you want to think about using groups, social groups, like on Facebook or on Hubly. A tool that allows you to post one thing and manage the conversation thread so that everybody knows what's going on. Secondly, you really want to use a calendar tool that allows parents to synchronize their different calendar apps of choice with your calendar system, so that you can just post your events in one calendar system. It should also filter events to the right parents according to the enrollment, the programs that their children are enrolled in. So again, what you want to stay away from is sharing a calendar that has all the events going on for the whole school. Ideally, you have one calendar that automatically filters away events that the parents don't need to know about or don't need to be reminded of. Certainly the parents do not want that information getting synchronized with their mobile phones or their Google Calendar. So it really does need to filter it out, and it shouldn't take any labor. That stuff should happen automatically. But if you do that, then again, you can pull out that kind of event and announcement boring type of information outside of your newsletters, and keep your newsletters focused on parent engagement, parent education, fun, passionate, inspiring content that keeps your parents opening up the emails more so than really long newsletters that are 90% irrelevant to all the parents and only has 10% of information that they're kind of scrolling to find. You want to stay away from those, because those will train parents to ignore your newsletters, whereas engaging inspirational content will train parents to pay attention and open up your newsletters. And lastly, that same type of information, that content that's parent focused and really, really parent relevant, you want to be taking that and also putting it on your blog. So not only are you communicating and sharing this information and engaging your existing enrolled parents and helping retention, you're also taking that same information and using it on your website and your blog so that it's searchable and shareable, so that you're engaging prospective parents as well with that same type of quality content. And in the next lesson, we're going to talk about why you should consider continuous enrollment so that you've got a nice steady stream of enrollment coming in month after month, rather than dealing with insane enrollment months 2 times a year.